This time on Poll Up, Americans are not very thrilled with the economy, and they seem to be blaming Donald Trump more than ever. We have a brand new poll out with NPR and PBS News, and it is pretty rough news for the president. We're going to look deep into the crosstabs to explain what's happening. Then, just in case you missed it, the world's biggest sporting event is happening right here in America, and many Americans don't really seem to care. The World Cup is huge almost everywhere in the world, but in the U.S. So what does a North American World Cup really mean? We're going to talk about that finally. A fun fact for lefties. Lee has something to say about that because he's the only lefty on the podcast. Okay, Mr. Superior, take it away. Then, hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I am Lee Maringoff.
Well, today we have a brand new poll out with our partners, NPR and PBS News. And as the summer is officially this Sunday, we took a look at what people are thinking about in terms of the economy and also some of their summer plans. Believe it or not, a lot of it is all connected because high prices are impacting everything. And Americans are definitely not impressed with the economy, have a lot of concerns with that, and they are laying their concerns at the president's doorstep. So it is, I think, officially now President Donald Trump's economy. Just 1/3 of Americans approve of how he is handling that economy, his lowest ever in our Marist poll. And they're really sending, his overall approval rating to its lowest of his second term as well. This is certainly driven mostly by Democrats and Republicans, but I think it is also very interesting to note that in this poll, nearly a quarter of Republicans also disapprove of the president's handling of the economy. Certainly, we are looking to the recently agreed upon, hopefully, resolution of the Iran conflict, which has jacked up particularly gas prices to a point where everybody has certainly noticed and has had an impact on Americans' finances. But Trump's overall approval rating among Americans is 36%. And as I mentioned, that is the lowest of his second term. He does have a disapproval of 59, tying his highest number ever from last month. This includes 64% of independents, only 17% of Republicans, but still noteworthy. And this 23 percentage point spread is the widest for Trump in any Marist poll in either of his terms. So, guys, the economy, and we've heard it over and over and over again in politics. It's the economy's stupid. It is impacting the perceptions of how Trump is doing his job. Is this something that is short term, or are we going to see some implications of this down the road?
I would argue that, as you say, it's the economy. And, I think it's combined with, first of all, second terms are not always the prettiest for presidents, and particularly the midterm election during the second term, also during the first term for that matter. Midterms are not the prettiest time when people sort of try to redo what they may have done just previously in the general election. But I think President Trump is suffering also from, the broken promises during the campaign, keep us in peace, keep prices down, all the things that people were upset with Joe Biden for, which Trump was obviously targeting. Those are the things that he seems to have come up short on. So we thought we were going to get, sort of borders around the nation, and yet he's become very involved in international affairs in surprising ways, Greenland, Canada, Mexico, and different countries have entered into it. And obviously, Iran, and he seems to get into all kinds of problems with that. But I think, as you say, it's connected. The prices, summer vacations, which we'll talk about, his approval rating, and his handling of the economy. And although his numbers among Republicans are much less, of course, than among Democrats, I find it interesting that we're pushing 20% on questions like disapproving of his handling of the economy, overall rating. And, 18% of people who tell us they voted for Donald Trump just last time tell us now they disapprove of his handling of the economy. Only 4% who voted for Kamala Harris approve of his handling of the economy. So it's quite a lopsided picture there. And we see this as, the time where the Republicans are starting to get a little nervous because the majorities in the House and Senate are so slim for them.
Also, we've seen the numbers for inflation came out recently as well, and actually I believe during the time of around this poll of 4.2%. And the president's comment about that was, well, yeah, it makes sense. We've been in this conflict in the Middle East and gas prices have risen. So, yeah, it's not surprising that as inflation has gone up and as we resolve this issue with Iran and the Middle East, things are going to get back to normal. How does that resonate with public opinion? And is there a risk here that the perception may be growing that the White House has a bit of a deaf ear to what Americans are experiencing?
Yes and yes. I think Lee's point is well taken that second terms are never great, right? There's no president who goes into a second term and comes out at the end better off at an earlier time. So you always come in with that deficit. You always come in with the second term, the midterms, and all the problems with that. But I think your point is well taken that he has taken a historically always tough situation for a second president, or not ideal, it's not always tough, and made it about as bad as you can make it by failing to live up to any of the promises or any of the significant big promises that he made to his followers and to Americans. And then to compound that by doing the opposite of things that his followers would want. I think it is striking, the numbers here about the record low. A lot of other polls have been at this for the last couple of months, have been saying they've hit a record low here and there. So I think we're all in the same position of finding the floor of support. But I do think this is the floor. I do think historical, like down the line, the thing that historians will talk about Donald Trump is no matter how bad things got, he never really got below about a third of Americans, standing with him. That's remarkable. I mean, to me, it's remarkable when you think about other presidents and their lows and what has driven them to the lows. He has managed to capture a third of Americans to stick with it. This economy, the other thing I'd say is that the straits are going to reopen in the Iran. Well, who knows? I mean, this has been the 30th time we've had a solution or an end to the Iran war. Who knows as this podcast goes, what actually happens? I don't think that the predictions about the economy magically getting better in the short term or even in the midterm are historically based. That doesn't happen. Economies don't rebound that quickly in any case, especially from an exogenous shock like oil prices, which are central not to the gas. Sure, it's about gasoline, but oil is central to the economy in so many other ways, and it takes a really long time to iron that out. The people who are oil experts who, aren't into politics, look, right, they're about the money. And there's almost nobody in the oil industry that has not been saying, whether it's in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, or wherever, that this doesn't go away soon, no matter how quickly the spigots reopen and the oil starts flowing. So I think this is a low, and I doubt that it probably goes lower, but I also don't think that there's a big rebound in store. Second term, all these problems, I think this may be as good as it gets.
Are the primary defeats we saw some recently for the president, in terms of the candidates that he supported over the last week, are those bellwethers?
I don't look a lot at the primary votes necessarily because the electorate is so different than what we're going to see in November. Obviously, if you're talking a Democratic primary or Republican primary, you're talking about a very, very small subset of that party. And the turnout would include the other party in the fall and also the independents. And so I don't put much stock in that, other than folks in Washington may put a little bit more stock in it, only because, that it kept them in line, why Trump had such great support in Congress and among Republicans and in the Senate among Republicans was the fear that they would be primaried. And that would be, the self-preservation clicked in. I mean, there's no other explanation for why he's been pitching almost a shutout among those. I would want to go back to one other thing that I thought was really interesting in our poll on the question of the economy. And it's to Jay's point on, have we hit the floor here? Does it get worse? There's one group, which if there is a group that is Trump's, core group, it is white non-college graduates. I mean, those are folks who have been in his corner the whole time. On the economy, this time last year, or in April of last year, 49% approved of his handling of the economy. Right now, among that group of white non-college folks, it's 38%, a drop of 11. And the figure was last April +4. In other words, he had a plurality in his corner. Now it's -16. So there's a 20-point swing among white non-college graduates. That's something the White House has to be not thrilled with, because that is where the base is. Does that mean they're all going to vote for the Democrats in the fall? Clearly not. The fear for the White House has got to be that they just stay home. I made a mistake. geez, I don't like the Canadian economy. I don't like the Democrats, but I'm not going to show up. And that's probably where the problem might fit.
One other thing quickly, each summer we look as one indication of how the country is doing economically at whether Americans are planning summer vacations. This is the time when most Americans choose to take time off to do leisure activities, stuff around the house, and also take off to other places. So right now, what we've seen is 55% of Americans do plan to take a vacation this summer. 45% do not. Interestingly, this is pretty consistent with results that we did see last year, although I think we were also in the midst of a struggling economy. And interestingly enough, comparable to 2021, where in the midst of a pandemic, many Americans did not hit the road, so to speak. And what I think is particularly interesting is that 2/3 of those 45% who are not going to take a vacation this summer, they say that cost is the biggest impact on summer plans. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of impact upon, what Americans earn and whether they're thinking about hitting the road. Is this, though, part of that same drumbeat that we're seeing? And, do we see an interest in change, perhaps this election season, as Americans are thinking about saving dollars, concerned about their finances, and not expending dollars the way they may have in the past?
Yes, to what Bart's saying. I mean, I think it is all connected. And that's when the dots connect to form a picture. That's when politically you got to worry. So these are not little episodic events. These are people deciding, well, I'm not comfortable going over to foreign countries for maybe safety reasons, and I'm not thrilled about the price at the pump. And, maybe I don't have time off from work, and I have, there's lots of things which are working against the kind of expensive long-term vacation. I don't think it's that people are punting on going on vacation as much as this idea of spending a lot of money at a time when uncertainty about their own finances and also the transformation that the economy is going through, keeps people cautious. And I think that's probably a rational decision on their part because the future is very uncertain.
And if you are one of those people that do not take a summer vacation, but take it at another time of year, you're part of the 10% of Americans who do that.
All right, so let's turn to the biggest sporting event in the world, the World Cup, which, as we mentioned in the open, is here in North America, where really absent any place else in the world, there's not a lot of interest in general. I mean, certainly there are a lot of American soccer fans, but a lot compared to, say, NFL fans or baseball fans, not so much. So we got a lot of data. Let me get through a couple of things. Just to be clear, none of us are big, World Cup fans per se. So unlike a lot of podcasts where you're going to hear all about which team is going to do what in the play and all of that, we have a different take on this, which is what does it mean to bring the World Cup to North America when Americans, almost alone in the world, don't really care very much? So interesting data to look at. Last month, YouGov did a survey. Hey, are Americans even going to pay attention? 54% of Americans say they are not at all, quote, not at all, unquote, interested in the World Cup. 13% say they're very interested. 59% say they expect to watch no World Cup matches at all. 5% say they will watch every day that there's a match on. So those are the hardcore fans. Ipsos also did a poll last month, and their findings were 36% of Americans plan to watch the World Cup in some form. That may include, for instance, seeing a clip on TikTok. Who knows? 64% of Americans say they've heard at least a little about the tournament, which would be hard to avoid, at least in some areas, especially in New York, where the final is going to be held. 26% say they're at least somewhat excited about the World Cup. Adults under 45 are more likely than older Americans to be interested. I thought this was interesting. This is from the YouGov survey. 21% of those under 45 interested, 7% of those over 45. So maybe there's a generational shift where the World Cup is more interesting to younger people. The expectations for the U.S. team. So look, if we're going to watch the World Cup, who are we rooting for? We'll probably rooting for us, right? A lot of Americans would. That Ipsos survey, 52% of Americans say the U.S. team's participation makes them proud to be American. But 58% of World Cup viewers in America say they don't have high expectations for the U.S. team. And only 37% of American World Cup viewers say they would be disappointed if the U.S. doesn't win. I think they're probably going to be disappointed. We never win, but who knows? I shouldn't be predicting this. So So, Lee, you're a huge sports fan, but not soccer, which I understand, or football, as it's called in the rest of the world. As a sports fan, when you see this, do you think what it means to Americans to have the world's greatest or biggest sporting event here has any resonance with Americans, even if they're not going to watch? Is it something that Americans are going, hey, we got the World Cup? Or is it really just the what?
Yeah, well, President Trump originally, a while back, did trumpet the fact that the World Cup was coming here, and this was going to be part of the summer of the 250th birth of, et cetera, et cetera. And he's not pretty much, we're not seeing him showing up at any soccer stadiums at the moment. I think he, knows there's two places to be. One was at the White House for his wrestling tournament, and the other was at Madison Square Garden. Americans are not saturated with sports. All you have to do is say New York Knicks. You know that the country has very much focused on that for a lot of reasons. Basketball not being what soccer is in the United States, it's being much more involved. So yes, it's occurring. It may get a little more attention when, as you said, the finals will be in MetLife Stadium. The answer to the question is maybe with the finals being in Jersey, that'll create a little bit more noise because there'll be fewer teams. I don't even think we have a great sense now of who all the teams are and who all the matches are and who are the favorites. We know that the United States is not favored.
I have a question for Barb. Soccer in America, the one time that Americans paid attention was women's soccer, women's football, a couple of years back, right?
That's right.
So I'm curious what you think about the distinction of that. Is like, this isn't getting a lot of attention. Women's football, the women's U.S. football team, now they maybe not Knicks level, but pretty darn close. Why the difference, do you think?
Yeah, and I think when, I think we are also kind of in a New York bit of a context with the Knicks. I could actually argue that the women's soccer team probably had a greater breadth of support and interest around the country, yes, even though basketball is a significant sport for many Americans. But, it's interesting because I think it just starts with the fact that, we call it soccer. You say it, it's football around the world. We have something else that is football, and I think that is, uniquely American. And it has taken a lot of time for Americans to build interest in the sport. I think this is a big moment of bringing the sport to particularly the United States. I don't want to say North America because it is incredibly popular in other parts of
right,
North
and
America.
Matches are in Mexico, right? And Mexico is a huge
exactly,
huge football,
and Canada. And Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it is a North American event, but it has been really slow to get a foothold, no pun intended, here. The generational differences, I think, are significant. I mean, youngsters have been playing, soccer now for probably 2 generations here. So it's not surprising that people under 45 have a significantly more interest in the games. And even though I am not a soccer fan, having visited relatives in California as a youngster and saw Pele play, I know I am very much dating myself. I was very, very, very young. But, I remember having somewhat of an interest in it as a youngster and not having the opportunity to play it, but nobody else really knew anything about it. It's a sport that is a team sport. And I think it is building in the U.S. I think this is a huge moment for it. And again, even though I'm not someone who follows it, I will likely be watching the final match, as I am a come lately for many sports, including basketball. And I very much enjoyed the finals of the Knicks and the Spurs these last couple of weeks. And I will come around to most sports, the finals of most sports, whether that's the Kentucky Derby or it's a Super Bowl or it's a hockey game for the Cup, the Stanley Cup. So I think it remains to be seen as, the fervor will increase, I think, as the field of teams narrows and as we focus on those that make the finals.
One thing that's happening is a trend that started a few years back, the World Cup being in the Middle East, for instance, and that is the politics of the World Cup. FIFA, which is the organization that runs the World Cup, in soccer or in football nations, is not the most popular organization. There's a lot of issues around that. But we have our own politics that we've brought to this that are very specific to this era, and that is ICE at the stadiums. And the University of Maryland and Washington Post did a poll just this month, asking Americans about this. 65% of Americans oppose ICE officers patrolling U.S. stadiums during the tournament, and that includes 92% of Democrats, 74% of independents. It is a complete flip. This is a big partisan divide. 72% of Republicans approve of ICE at the stadiums. And then YouGov last month, that May poll, 36% of Americans say ICE should have a role in providing security. That 30, we were always talking about the 33, 35%. That seems to be that Trump number. 35% say ICE should have no role at all. And 41% of Americans think ICE providing security would make people less safe as opposed to making it safer. I'm just interested that this is, what your take is, that in terms of what the world sees about the World Cup being in North America, specifically the American part of that, this has actually gotten a lot of attention in the foreign media. I read some British papers and elsewhere, and this has gotten a lot of attention that the world is focused on. I would think that's not a great thing. But I am just interested in your take on how the politics has merged with football in this way here in America.
No, I think it's an unfortunate byproduct, because if you're hosting an international event, you want security, but you don't want necessarily ICE providing. I mean, is that really going to be for safety, or are they on the hunt for certain folks who might, be
right? And considering how many foreigners come to the World Cup, it's a huge tourist draw for foreign tourists.
Yes, and talk about bad advertising. There's enough brand issues with football versus soccer. But if you're going to put ICE into the mix, then you're asking for even more trouble.
Well, also, and, I think it is, though, a way of, when you talk about messaging and branding, it certainly is a very public way of defining the policy and describing the policy that we do have in the U.S. It is not just about having ICE at the World Cup stadiums, but it's about a policy in the U.S. of containing immigration overall, and particularly immigration of people from those nations. So perhaps it's not the best messaging for a country that prides itself on being open to immigrants and opportunity, but it certainly is a coherent messaging with the policy that is being put forward by this administration.
Okay, so I think this is a wonderful fun fact, and I have a lot of backing for that. I will get sports into this. I will get politics into this, because that's going to be a reach, but not for me. So the question is, Gallup asked in 1948, the question was either your father or your mother or both left-handed. Father 5%, mother 3%, neither 86%, don't know 5%, which I think is kind of funny. But so, there was some left-handedness at the time, but it wasn't even hitting double digits when you included both parents into the mix. And as you, I think, indicated in the beginning, I am the sole left-handed person on this particular podcast, and I say a few things on that. One, it's a right-handed world we live in. So lefties are better at doing right-handed things than righties are at doing left-handed things, because we get more practice doing the other hand. Now, that may be a little bit of a reach, but we're going to go around here, and I want to know, the question being, was either of your parents left-handed? And then we'll talk some other things about sports and politics related to this question. Let's go to students first. Cassidy?
Well, I am righty, and everybody in my immediate family is righty. However, my dad does golf and bat lefty.
That's interesting, because although I'm left-handed in everything, I bat right-handed. So if I were kicking a soccer ball, we just talked about that, I would be kicking it with my right foot. It's just part of what left-handed
So
people do.
does that mean you're left-handed but right-footed?
That's correct. It's a whole new survey question possible. Jay, any lefties in your neighborhood?
No lefties in my family that I know of. I'm totally righty. And I'm one of these, not even remotely ambidextrous people. I can barely brush my teeth with my left hand. I am super
I was going to
right-sided.
comment on that. No, I
didn't say I didn't brush my teeth. I said I can't do it with my left hand.
Okay, Barbara.
I have something to add. Jenny reminded, if you were to picture yourself picking up any Poland Springs water bottle and opening it, I only open stuff lefty. I hold it with my right hand and open it with my left hand for everything, and I don't know why.
This is my right hand. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah. Lots of idiosyncrasies, because we sometimes need both hands for these things. Barb, you're right-handed. Any Carvalho's They were left-handed, I don't believe so.
Well, my family actually harkens back to the dark ages when left-handedness was thought to be, the act of the devil, and that somehow, you're going to end up some kind of misanthrope. So my dad was
I
left-handed.
did not know that.
And he was forced, in no uncertain terms, to use his right hand. And every time he reached for something with the left hand, he was scolded. And yes, I suspect there, was some physical punishment involved in this, particularly in school. So actually, I would say that although my entire family was right-handed, we probably leaned on the side of being more ambidextrous and being able to do other things with our left hands and thinking that it was fun just to tease Dad.
Yeah, was your father's brother left-handed originally, or?
That I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
So my mother went down the same road. My mother was left-handed, as am I, but my mother was left-handed, but she wrote with her right hand, and her school was exactly the reason for that. You weren't supposed to write with your left hand, and you didn't. I will tell you that left-handed people smear ink a lot when they're writing, but that's because of the way we do that. But here we are, guys. Politics. Name me a few presidents since World War II who happen to be left-handed.
Kennedy and Obama, for sure, right?
I thought Clinton.
Clinton
was
and Obama,
left-handed.
Truman, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and then Clinton and Obama.
Wow.
I think Ross Perot, for those of you who remember him, was also left-handed. So a lot of lefties.
The giant sucking sound was from his left hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have to end with the New York Knicks because that's what the talk of the town. And Jalen Brunson does shoot with his left hand. Actually, he can shoot with both hands, but he is left-handed.
Yeah, he can shoot any way he wants.
Well, we have to wrap up the fun fact by saying Happy Father's Day to the father of the Marist
Oh,
Polling.
hey, there you go.
And that was not a left-handed
No, it was not.
compliment
Okay,
either.
this is getting very dangerous. We're going to leave it right there. This is, incidentally, I believe, episode 449. Is that correct? I think so. That means 450 coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. We should have a cake or something to blow out the candles, I guess. 450. That's a lot. Anyway, enjoy the week, folks.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes AJ Gambino, Tommy Rogers, Cassie Connors, and Molly Goodger.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal accessible from our website.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.